I found out about the affair from my daughter's medical records, not from correspondence, not from other people's whispers, and not even from a kiss I happened to see in a car at our supermarket. From a dry laboratory printout, where next to her name were letters and numbers that reminded me of gears that had fallen out of a clock. HLA-A, HLA-B, DRB1, a set that was supposed to be the key to salvation. But at the bottom was a neat comment from the doctor. Possible paternity mismatch. I read it, and it was as if someone's invisible hand was slowly turning the clock back to that night, 21 years ago, when I brought Olea hot tea and a blanket because the stove in our first rented house in North Canton had broken down, and she laughed, tucking her feet into wool socks with deer on them. My name is Igor. I repair watches, old ones, new ones, expensive ones, cheap ones, ones that tick-tock, and ones that buzz on batteries. I have a small workshop on the corner between Miguel's barbershop and the fishing tackle shop. I love things that can be taken apart, understood, and put back together. But on the day they told us about the mismatch, my life turned into a chronometer with a broken anchor. The hands were spinning, time was falling apart into loose minutes, and all I could do was listen to the monitor beeping in our Lisa's intensive care unit. Lisa was 20. She was a sophomore, working part-time at a coffee shop on campus, saving up for a trip to Utah. "Dad, you said the canyons are like music." And then, sudden fatigue, bruises on her legs out of nowhere, fever. Our family doctor sent us to a hematologist, and the hematologist sent us for a biopsy. At first, the word leukemia sounded as if it were coming through water. Then the tests began, along with treatment plans and names of drugs I couldn't pronounce. It quickly became clear that Lisa's best chance for remission was a bone marrow transplant, preferably from a relative, such as her parents. Olea and I sat in the office and held hands. Dr. Jenkins, a thin man with rimless glasses, spoke calmly and clearly, as if he were explaining the workings of the simplest alarm clock to me. "We'll do the typing. Don't worry ahead of time. There are sometimes mismatches." He didn't have time to finish. The printouts were laid on the table. Olea's matched half of the time, mine, almost none. He looked up and looked at us in a very human way. "It happens," he said, "that social fatherhood and biological fatherhood don't match. That doesn't make anyone bad, but it's important for us to know the truth for Lisa's sake, so we can search for a donor effectively." Olea didn't cry then. She didn't look at me. She just sat there, staring at the junction of the tabletop and her palms. Her silence was like the roar of an airplane that cannot be heard from the ground. I didn't say a word. I nodded to the doctor, asked where to go to give more blood, signed the papers, and led Lisa down the hallway, where the walls were mint green and a boy with an IV stand was being wheeled out of the ward. I was calm. Not a single wrong move, not a single unnecessary question. I saw Olea reaching for the phone and could almost physically feel a spring slowly winding up inside me. Olea and I came to the States in the late 90s. I had a degree in automation engineering, which no one here needed. She had the ability to bake pies and put jars of cucumbers away so that the lids jingled like bells. We rented a tiny house next to a church where our Russians gathered every Sunday. I got a job at a home appliance repair service, and Olea got a job at a cleaning company. We had two kinds of loneliness, the kind that can be cured by community, and the kind that can only be cured by time. In the first case, we went to joint dinners, listened to someone complaining about taxes and longing for snow. In the second, we sat silently on the porch and watched the road where a yellow school bus passed every 20 minutes. A year later, Lisa was born. I remember that night minute by minute. Olea screamed quietly. That's what happens when the pain is beyond the usual measure. I ran for water, called the midwife, didn't know what to do with myself. When Lisa was born, Olia held her carefully, like you would hold a sparrow that had flown into the house. We were happy as people who have almost nothing can be. Then everything was like everyone else's. Loans, job changes. I finally found my own little shop. Bought some old shelves, hung up a sign that said, Igor's Time Works, and Olia went to work as a receptionist at a dental office, and then at a hospital, in the appointment scheduling department. She was good at talking. She could explain to a grandmother on the phone why she needed to come for an ultrasound on an empty stomach without offending anyone. In the evenings, we would sit down at the table and tell each other what we had seen, what we had fixed, who we had made cry, and who we had made laugh. Yes, we argued. It would be foolish to pretend now that there was no fatigue, anger, or misunderstanding. I drank, but not to the point of being scary. I just bought a six-pack on Fridays and thought, it's easier this way. Olia shut herself off and remained silent. Sometimes we went whole weeks without having a normal conversation. But I swore to myself and to her that it would all settle down, pass, we'll hold on. And we held on. And now I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, silently watching the raindrops spread across the windshield. Inconsistency. The word pounded in my temples. I started the engine, turned it off, started it again. Messages from clients flashed on my phone. Igor, my watch. And I thought, my house will now also run incorrectly, like an old mantel clock if it is not set strictly level. Are you going to say anything? Olia asked when we got home that evening and Lisa fell asleep. She was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the sink, clutching a cup in her hands, as if warming herself from the inside. What can I say? I asked. That I'm not a father? Or that this is all for Lisa, and the rest can wait? If you want the later answer, I'm ready. She nodded, and that nod wasn't just about today. It was a nod for 20 years, for all the times we chose not now. Let's postpone. Let's get around it. We agreed to remain silent. But silence is different for everyone. Mine is like a ringing emptiness. Hers is like a box with a locked radio, where everything hisses and plays, but the lid is closed. From that day on, a strange life began. In the morning, I would go to the workshop, open the shutters, take out the old barometer that passers-by liked so much, and turn on the lamp above the table. At noon, the ticking changed its strength, as if someone in the world was weighing weights on an invisible cuckoo clock. In the evenings, Olia and I took turns staying with Lisa, sometimes at home, sometimes at the hospital, because she had a fever, or a dull reaction to the medication, or just fear. I learned to cook chicken broth so that it smelled like childhood. Olia learned to hide her phone when it vibrated. I pretended not to see it. But once in the workshop, when I was replacing a broken spring in a Belova table clock, Olia's phone flashed on the table. She had left it with me while she ran to the pharmacy. The screen lit up and went dark. I could have looked away and probably gone on with my life. But I've always had a guilty curiosity, which has shaped my life with mechanisms. I pressed the button. There were 2 messages from a contact named M. The first, I found a lab. They do express tests. The second, don't worry, I'll be there early. And a photo, a motel room on the highway, a white door with a peeling red frame, and a key on a keychain with the number 11. I sat there for a long time. Then I got up, turned off the lamp, put on my jacket, put my phone in my pocket, and drove off. Motels always smell the same: laundry detergent, old air conditioning, cheap coffee that they start brewing in the morning at the front desk. I didn't go into the office, but walked around the side of the building and looked up. Room 11 was on the 2nd floor. The door was closed. I could hear voices. They weren't whispering or laughing. They were speaking dryly, clearly, as if agreeing to the terms of a deal. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the intonations. Olya spoke like that when she was negotiating something important, without haggling. I raised my fist, ready to knock, but the door opened by itself. Standing in front of me was a man, the very same M. He looked like someone who knew a lot and had forgiven himself a lot. An abstract 45 with a neat beard, wearing a jacket without any identifying marks. He was surprised, but he didn't back down. Olya was sitting in the back of the room. She didn't scream like in the movies. She just looked at me. That's all. "Hi, Igor," he said. "I'm Mark. Sorry for being so." Olya's eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. "This is," I began, but couldn't find the word betrayal. It was like a rough nut that couldn't be grasped with my fingers. "It's not what you think," said Olya, a phrase that usually makes you want to leave or laugh, but she said it without emptiness. "It's what happened, and it's what can save Lisa." I was silent. "I'm the biological father," Mark said. The words fell like heavy weights into an old grandfather clock. It swayed in my chest. 21 years ago, Olya continued, looking somewhere off to the side. "When we were expecting Lisa, you were working a side job in a neighboring state. We couldn't conceive. 2 miscarriages. I already thought it was over. And then, do you remember our party at Anton's? Everyone was there. You, me, him. You went to get beer. I stayed. It was a foolish act of desperation. It was just once. Once. I thought Lisa was yours because the timing was almost the same. Then I forbade myself to think about it. And then, you were such a father. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know my whole life. And now you need a donor," Mark said. "And I'm getting tested. And I'm not sure I'm a match." I looked at him and tried to figure out what the face of a man who had been your shadow for 20 years looked like. And I couldn't understand. "Why are you here?" I finally asked, and I heard how childish my question sounded. "Why didn't you disappear?" "Because Olya called," he replied. "She found me through old contacts, and because I'm human too." "He's married," Olya said quietly. "He has children. He didn't tell anyone. His wife doesn't know. No one does." I asked him, and he agreed. "Igor, I didn't want this." I heard my own laughter. It came out of me in bursts, like air from a balloon. "You didn't want this?" I asked. "What, Olya? A lifetime of lies? Or this motel?" "The motel is because they know me at work," she said. "And they know you. And I don't want Lisa to have it worse than she does. I don't want people talking about her." "Can people talk about me?" I asked. "Not you," she said. And for the first time she looked at me the way she used to, straight in the eye, without a shield. "But you're a grown man. And you know that Lisa is important right now. Everything else can wait. I'll say whatever you want. Straightforward, honest. But Igor, please, let me finish Mark's tests. They're scheduled for tomorrow." I stood in the doorway and felt the peeling red paint slip from under my palm. In 30 seconds, I managed to be every person in that room. The man who was betrayed. The man who betrayed. The husband who holds on to his daughter. The man who is ready to break something. And the one who will fix it again. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow, you're both going to the lab. And the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, we'll talk. And I swear, no more secret hotels. Otherwise, I just can't take it." "Okay," Olya nodded. Mark stepped aside. I walked past him and caught a faint whiff of cheap soap. It's nice that betrayal can have a smell too. Mark took the test at the lab. It turned out to be a partial match, closer than mine, but still not perfect. Olya walked around with a stony face, and I walked around like a watchmaker, at an exhibition where everything was ticking out of sync. We waited for news from the donor registry. Meanwhile, Lisa's immune system was being disciplined, then supported, then restarted again. She was losing weight. For some reason, Olia started laughing more, but her laughter was too shrill, like an alarm clock set for 5 in the morning. I became more silent, and my silence was like white noise. One evening, Pastor Matt from our church came to my workshop. He brought a wall clock, a fisherman's clock with a sailboat. I set the clock. He stood there, looked at it, and suddenly said, "I know things are tough in your family right now, Igor. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." "What can you do to help?" I said. "Except maybe secretly turn the hands so that the days are longer." "Sometimes the hands can't be turned," he replied. "Sometimes you just have to live with what you have. And sometimes you have to take the whole mechanism out of the wall and put in a new one." I looked at the sailboat, where the wind was painted with smooth white strokes, and thought that sometimes living means accepting that your home is not your home. That night, I drove to the hospital to relieve Olia at Lisa's. The road was empty. There was a bag of pelmeni on the passenger seat of the car. For some reason, I had taken them just in case, even though the microwave in the ward didn't work at night. When I arrived, I saw Olia downstairs. She was standing under the canopy of the smoking area, talking on the phone. Her voice was soft and strange, as if she were talking to a child. "It's Mark," she said when I approached. He told his wife. And there's a fire at his house." "And who are you in this fire?" I asked. "A firefighter?" "No," she said wearily. "I'm the detonator. But I didn't ask for this, Igor. I only asked for an analysis. He decided he couldn't live a lie anymore. That's all. That's all. That's all 20 years, that's all." I silently took Olia by the elbow, as one takes someone walking on a tightrope, and led her upstairs to Lisa. When what you feared happens, it always seems more mundane than you expected. Mark called in the morning. "I'll let the registry know that I'm available. I'm ready to take all the tests. And my children too. The oldest is 22. The youngest is 19. If necessary, they will take the tests too." "Are you going to tell your children more than you've told me in 20 years?" I asked. "I'll tell them the truth," he replied. "I can't keep it from them any longer." Olia sat at the table, her fingers digging into the tablecloth, which had 2 cigarette burns in it, a long-standing story of ours, from when I was quitting. She looked at me, and for the first time ever, I saw something in her eyes that looked very much like fear. Not shame. Fear. Fear of losing me. The fear that smells like night when a child is hot and delirious. "Say something," she asked quietly. "Anything." "I don't know what to say," I replied. "Every word I say is like a hammer. And Lisa is lying between us, listening to us hammering. And I'm afraid that this hammering is reaching her." "I know," Olia whispered. "I know." We were silent. In that silence, a plan was born. Strange, asymmetrical, but the only one that made sense. I know how to do one thing. Gather people around things that are going wrong, whether it's walkers or fate. I came up with Lisa's Day. I went to Pastor Matt, to the owner of the barbershop, to Miguel, to the man from the fishing store. We printed flyers. "Help Lisa. Come and give a cheek swab. It doesn't hurt. Someone may need your compatibility." We set the date for Saturday. The church provided the hall. Some college kids brought speakers and played music. The girls baked muffins. Miguel gave 10 people free haircuts. I hung an old clock without hands on the wall as a symbol of the pause we all have to endure, and next to it, a brand new, shiny one. We found volunteers from an organization that deals with bone marrow donation. They brought kits and tables, smiled, and explained how it works. Just swab the inside of your cheeks with a cotton swab. I stood at the entrance and waited. Olia arrived 20 minutes after we started. She was wearing her autumn coat and the scarf I gave her 3 years ago. She hugged me. She just hugged me, without saying a word. Mark arrived later with his son. I recognized his son immediately. He had so much of Lisa's expression in his eyes that it made my heart ache. They handed in their swabs and signed the consent forms. I stood there thinking that now, perhaps, some of us would feel pain, like a knife cutting through skin. But it would be the kind of pain that makes life worth living. Lizzie's day became almost a holiday for us. Neighbors came. Our people came. Not our people came. Americans, Mexicans, Ukrainians, blacks, whites, all in one line, all with the same funny cotton swab in their mouths. A boy played the guitar. The pastor read a short prayer that didn't mention guilt or punishment, only that the world is a network of people, and sometimes one knot has to hold more than it should. On Monday, the registry called. They had found a potential donor in another state. Not perfect, but suitable. More tests were needed, then approval, then preparation for therapy. It meant a chance, a real one, without any ifs. I sat in the car and cried. My hands hurt like after hard work, perhaps because all this time I had really been working, for the first time in many years, on a large scale and in the right way. At the same time, a second front opened up in our family. Olia and I started talking. Finally, honestly. It was dirty, painful, and ridiculous. We sat at the table and unraveled our life back to the first resentments. 2. I asked you not to drink then. 2. You're always in your workshop. 2. You want too much from me. 2. I was afraid to be alone. 2. I didn't think you'd been alone for so long. 2. Why, Olia, why didn't you say anything? Because you were weak at that moment, she said once. And so was I. And we would have destroyed each other. And I was a coward, Igor. I thought that if I said anything, it would all end. Back then, we had no money, no doctors, no status. I thought, we'll get through this, and then somehow. And then I fell in love with you, as Lisa's father. And as a husband, yes. And it all got mixed up. I'm to blame. I know that. But I really loved you all this time, in my own way. In your own way, I repeated. It's like a clock in its own way. It runs correctly, but it doesn't show your time. What is your time? She asked. Mine is the one in which you tell me the truth, I replied. We went to family therapy. Yes, in our 40s. Funny? Probably. But we needed a third party to tell us that we weren't freaks. That we were the same people who went to community evenings and garage sales, drank coffee from cheap mugs, and laughed at how Lisa, at the age of 5, confused crossed the road with run across the road. The therapist looked at us, nodded, and sometimes very accurately stuck pins into our soft bellies. Igor, you've measured love by logic and actions your whole life. And Olia, by fear and expectation. That's where the disconnect is. I listened and thought, yes, I am a clock with an open mechanism. I want everything to shine and tick in plain sight. And Olia has a dome, a cap. Her long-term memory of pain is so strong that she will always cover the mechanism with her palm, even in the heat. Lisa had a transplant. The donor was a guy from Missouri, 27 years old, a programmer. I later found him through the organization and wrote him a letter, which he hasn't read yet. I don't know what to say in it so that it doesn't sound like charity. Thank you is a big word, but sometimes it's not enough. The procedure was complicated, with complications, with weeks where every morning you paint with a smooth voice, "Hi baby, it's daddy," even though she's 20 and has black nails with thin gold stripes, and your voice is the last thing you have power over. On the day Lisa was transferred from intensive care to the clean room, something strange happened to me. I was sitting on a chair and fell asleep. Sleep came like an old friend, without knocking or explanation. I dreamed that I was repairing a huge tower clock in the city center. There was a crowd around me. Everyone was looking up, and I was sitting inside the mechanism and realized that there was only one way to eliminate the internal backlash: if I allowed the gear to move slightly outside the rules, to slip. And then they, all of them, would start to run smoothly. I woke up when my wife Olya put her hand on my shoulder. She was sitting next to me, looking at Lisa. Her gaze said it all: fatigue, guilt, love, stubbornness, tenderness. I took her hand. We were silent. And in that silence, for the first time ever, I found an answer that was not about destruction, but about construction. "We will live," I said. "But Olya, it will be a different life. I don't know if we'll be together. I honestly don't know. But I know what I don't want. I don't want to pretend. Not now. Not ever." "Me neither," she said. Lisa slowly came to her senses. Her hair fell out, then started to grow back, at first like peach fuzz. She was angry, a lot, about important things and trivial things. She laughed, a little nervously. She demanded, "Dad, no lectures?" And then she came to me and laid her head on my lap, like when she was 12, and we watched the old Sherlock Holmes together. She knew about the inconsistency. We told her right away, explained as best we could. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You're my dad. Everything else is technical details. But I feel bad for Mom, and for you, and for myself. I guess that's normal?" "Nothing about us is abnormal right now," I replied. "But if it doesn't eat you up, that's already a victory." Mark rarely appeared on the horizon. He got divorced. His wife couldn't take it. I don't know what he told the children, but once in the hospital I ran into his daughter, the 19-year-old. She looked at Lisa the way you look at a mirror. I looked away. We weren't ready to build those bridges. It was too early. And then spring came. My workshop smelled of metal and old wood. I stopped drinking on Fridays. On Sunday, when the church asked me again to tune their big clock in the hall, I climbed the ladder, and for the first time in a long time, felt that I wasn't falling. No guilt, no anger, no trash under my feet. I just held on to the steps. Olya rented a room from a friend, 2 bus stops away from us. We decided to live separately, not because we hated each other, but because otherwise we would be sucked back into our "now is not the time" vortex. Now was the time. In the evenings, we would meet at Lisa's, sometimes just the 2 of us, sometimes the 3 of us. Sometimes the pastor would come, sometimes Mark. We learned to speak a language where there were no convenient excuses, no fear of loneliness, but an acknowledgement of our own flaws. It wasn't a beautiful movie. It was breakdowns, arguments, ridiculous requests like, "Don't put your mug on the book." And that's life too. One evening, when Lisa fell asleep, Olya and I walked to the diner on the corner. They served tuna sandwiches there, which we used to love when we were poor and happy. We sat at a table by the window. Olya watched the people. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about the truth. Everyone praises it, but few people talk about how cold it is, and how it requires courage every day. You're a brave man, Igor. I'm not. I've realized that. And for the first time, I'm not ashamed of it. I need to learn to be braver. I'm afraid I won't be able to learn without you. But I have no right to ask you to be my crutch again." "The truth isn't a medal," I replied. You don't wear it on your chest. You put it in your pocket, so you can touch it when you need to. I don't know how things will turn out for us, but I know that I don't want to drag you around. You there, me here. I want, if we are together, not because we have to, but because we both chose to. I choose you, she said. And I choose myself, I replied. And perhaps you along with me. Give it time. She nodded. And at that moment, I saw my reflection in the window. A man with gray temples, who for the first time in many years wasn't trying to please everyone at once. 6 months passed. Lisa returned to her studies, partly online. She found the strength to argue over trifles, to demonstratively twist the black arrows of her eyeliner, and to argue with me about whether there is philosophy in The Simpsons. She laughed more and more often, and there was no longer any fragility in that laughter. Olya and I were sitting in my workshop. I was repairing a Seiko wristwatch whose bezel had fallen off. Olya was sorting through a box of old watch straps. "Do you remember how you used to help Grandpa?" she asked. "Which grandfather?" "Our neighbor, Mr. Waltz. He gave you berry pie, and you tuned his cuckoo clock." "Oh, yes," I smiled. "He always said, if a cuckoo doesn't cuckoo, it's not a cuckoo. It's a parrot with a diploma." "I thought then," she said, "that everything would still be simple for us. That our life would be like that cuckoo clock, cheerful, predictable. And then we started college, and we failed half of our classes. Sometimes I feel like I'm still in my freshman year. And I feel like I passed everything with the help of cheat sheets," I replied. "And now I have to retake the exams." We laughed. And in that laughter was something I hadn't heard in a long time: honesty. Mark called a year after Lisa's day. He said he wanted to meet. We sat in a coffee shop and said nothing. 2 grown men, each with his own guilt, his own pride, his own attempts to atone for that guilt with his actions. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked sincerely. "For not causing a massacre," he said. "I would have, if I were you." "I wanted to," I replied. But then I realized that the massacre had nothing to do with Lisa. "My daughter sometimes writes to Lisa," he said quietly. "They don't talk about me, just books and TV shows. I don't interfere. I try to live my life in such a way that I'm not just a guilty person. I don't know if I'm succeeding." "You are," I said. "I can see how you're holding up. And that's true too. I'll never be your friend. But I'm not your enemy." He nodded. We shook hands. I went outside and realized for the first time that my image as a cheated husband was no longer about me. I am Lisa's dad. I am the person who organizes Donor Day in my neighborhood. I am the teacher who teaches children at Saturday school how to take apart old alarm clocks. Each one is full of sand, as if time had crept into them improperly all these years. Olya quietly moved back, not because it was time, but because we both saw that we were drawn to each other, like a needle is drawn to a magnet, not out of habit, but out of choice. We entered into a strange marriage contract, aloud, without a notary. It went like this: if something hurts, we talk about it. If we step on each other's toes, we talk about it. If we want to leave, we talk about it. If we're lazy, we don't lie that we have a lot to do. If we feel that we are starting to come up with convenient versions, we stop. Honesty is not a club, but a flashlight. It doesn't hit, it illuminates. Lisa laughed at us. "Mom, Dad, you're cute and weird," but I could see how it calmed her down. One evening, she laid 3 small paper arrows on the table and said, "You are the North, you are the East, and I am the West. We just need to find the South, and we'll have the whole set." "You are the South," said Olya. "No," I objected. The South is our future silence. Silence without broken springs. We laughed like 3 children, and I suddenly realized that this was the ending. Not a festive one, not with fireworks, not with the phrase, "and they lived happily ever after," but a normal, human ending to any real crisis. It becomes part of the furniture. It ceases to be that table where we argued and becomes just a table where we have breakfast and put our keys. This year, we held another donor day. The poster featured not only Lisa, but also 3 other children from our neighborhood. We no longer named it after just one person. We put my clock, the one without hands, in the church hall and ceremoniously put the hands back on it in front of everyone. The pastor gave a speech about time that is now moving again. I pressed a small lever and the clock came to life. People applauded. Olya stood next to me and held my elbow, just as I had held hers that night under the hospital canopy. After the event, a woman in her 50s approached me. She said she had read the story in our group and that it was like yours. I wanted to ask her what exactly she meant by like ours. About donation, about incompatibility, about guilt, about other people's doors. But I didn't. Because I realized that we no longer need to break this story down into its components. It is now like a mechanism that we spent a year repairing and putting back together. It's not perfect. Something creaks in it, but it's ours. And in it is our second, our minute, our hour. I still sometimes wake up at night, get up, go to the kitchen and drink water. I still sometimes hear the door of room 11 in a cheap motel slam shut from the past. I know that it will always be with us, like a scar. It doesn't go away, it just becomes part of the skin, which can be used to predict the weather. And I've also learned to hear other things. How Lisa turns over in her sleep in the next room and snores softly. How Olya fixes her hair on the pillow in her half-sleep. How the clock on the shelf in the workshop ticks, ticks, ticks. And this time is no longer about death. It's about how living people can make mistakes and still pick themselves up again. Not from perfectly cast factory parts, but from what they have. A little truth, a little cowardice, a little stubbornness, a lot of love, and, inevitably, a whispering hope that next time we'll say the important things to each other in time. That evening, as we walked home along the empty street, the sky was a deep blue, the kind you only see in May. Our little family train was reflected in the pharmacy window. Me, Olya, Lisa. We walked slowly, without rushing, each at our own pace. And I thought that the most difficult thing in life is not to catch up, not to overtake, not to hold on, but to coordinate your movements, so that your anchor doesn't hit the gear like a hammer, but gently rests on the cog. 1, 2, 1, 2, letting the world go at its own pace. I don't know how this is recorded in medical records, perhaps as remission, and in family records, as a conditionally happy ending. For me, just life, in which the clock is ticking again. And if you listen closely, that quiet tick-tock doesn't sound like a reminder that time is running out, but like a promise that time is here. And that, with desire and patience, it can be adjusted, without deceiving anyone who stands nearby and watches the hands.